This is Nick Gisch's interview with U.S. Air Force veteran Burdette Conover. Burdette enlisted in the Air Force in 1966 and soon began repairing navigation equipment in Vietnam. Burdette shares the basic belief that many of our veterans have, that he did what was necessary and did what was asked of him because it's the right thing to do. I hope you enjoy listening to Nick's interview with Burdette.
My name is Nicholas Gisch, and I'm a junior at Ridgeview High School. I was honored to interview Burdette Conover on February 15, 2018. Thank you for tuning in to our podcast. I hope you enjoy listening.
I'm Burdette Conover. I'm 70 years old, and I served in the U.S. Air Force from 1966 to 1969. When I joined the Air Force, I joined the Sioux City Air National Guard.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted in the Air Force to avoid the draft. Enlisted in 1966.
If you have been following our podcast, you know that everyone has an opinion of the Vietnam War. Burdette is no different. His view on the war has not wavered one little bit, even 48 years after enlisting.
I have a basic belief that if you're going to live in this country and be a part of it, if you disagree with the war or you disagree with anything in the government, the place to take care of it is the ballot box. In all other cases, you do what you're told. When I went to Vietnam, I was 20. I turned 21 in Vietnam. At that time, you had to be 21 to vote. First time I voted was absentee ballot in Vietnam, and I try not to ever miss a vote now.
Burdette admits that he wasn't given much of an adjustment period when he arrived in Vietnam.
The first night I was there, we had a rocket mortar attack.
Oh my.
And I did everything I was told, get dressed, get flak back vest on, grab my M16, get to the bunker, and I realized I'm the last guy to the bunker. And I need to change this routine in a hurry because this is not going to happen again.
There were more than 2.5 million Americans who served in the Vietnam War. I think it goes without saying that most of us cannot comprehend the number of different jobs that were assigned to that number of servicemen. One such job was Burdette's. He was an airborne navigation repairman.
My spec part was airborne navigation repair, and that's a fancy word for repairing the navigation equipment on the fighter planes. That included TACAN, radio compass, IFF, identification of friend and foe, altimeters, which tells the height of the plane at all times, both above sea level and above ground level. And then at the tail end of Vietnam, when I was over there, I went and trained on the first pinpoint bombing electronic sets. Basically on an air base. For the most part, our job was to make sure the planes flew. But also on the air base, when it was foggy, which invariably is quite often in Vietnam, the planes have low, and a lot of times the planes wouldn't fly, and wouldn't be able to fly because of the fog, low visibility. And so that was when they knew we couldn't get air support, when they would try to overrun the base. So it didn't matter what rank you were, everybody was a perimeter guard when that happened.
Along with learning about all the different jobs in a war, we've learned that some jobs allowed for little free time. Was Burdette's job one that had some downtime?
Yes and no. We had, what we worked is a 12-hour shift, 7 days a week.
Oh, geez.
My shift was 7 o'clock at night till 7 o'clock in the morning. And it was 7 days a week. Maybe once a month, they'd try to give you 1 day off.
Jeez.
And it was just what was necessary.
Yeah,
And if there was times we weren't flying, this sort of thing, everything got adjusted accordingly. We did have a black-topped basketball court. We did have a dirt mud softball field. We did try to play football, and it was tackle football with no pads, kind of to kill time.
As many of our listeners know, our veterans all have stories to share. Do we not ask about their experience because we don't want to know, or because of what we are afraid we'll hear? Let's ask the question together. What was Burdette's most memorable moment in Vietnam?
Tell you what, you try to remember the good times.
Yeah.
And maybe some of them weren't so good. You have a tendency to just kind of shut them out. One time, one of our black boxes was supposed to self-destruct when the plane went down, and we did not show a record of it. So they had me go with the helicopter and go out and make sure the black box got out of the plane before the Vietnamese could get it.
Many people, whether in school or the workplace, don't always see eye to eye with everyone they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. What were relationships like in the war where tensions were already pretty high?
Good relationship. We knew it did not matter a bit what race, what you believed otherwise, this sort of thing. You knew you had to have each other's back. The one exception, there was a few that got a hold of drugs, this sort of thing, and we essentially isolated them and had nothing to do with them and tried to avoid ever being with them. If you're not going to come home in a box, you do everything possible that you're able to handle your part and people you trust next to you.
While on the topic of relationships, Burdette explained what it's like to come home to the United States.
Actually, around Holstein it was good. Holstein treated us, because for one thing, there was 5 of us from Holstein that were in our unit on the same airbase. So they were, when one would get a letter, they would compare it, tell the other families. It might be talked about uptown at coffee, this type of thing. Where it was not as good is if you would go to, Sioux City wasn't bad, but Des Moines was terrible. Going to any of the other cities, and you just did not let anybody know you were a veteran. Ironically, after the Gulf Wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, I'd got more thank yous for my service than I ever got in the first 20 years.
Thank you, Burdette, for sharing your Vietnam experiences with us. It certainly helps us gain a deeper understanding of what our servicemen and women experienced. Next week, we'll have the opportunity to learn even more when we post Michaela Hansen's interview with Dale Nelson.